I'd like to thank you, Jeff, for that nice introduction, and also thank the Free Thought Association of West Michigan for asking me here this evening to discuss a topic that's very dear to me. As Jeff mentioned in the introduction, I spent a good part of my professional time dealing with the evolution, anti-evolution issue here in Michigan and nationally. If you've been paying attention to the newspapers this last year, Ohio, our state to the south, has experienced quite a few difficulties with the attempts of the anti-evolution groups to try and bring non-scientific education into the science classroom under the guise of what is called intelligent design. You think, well, thank goodness it's south of the border, it's not here. We had it in Kansas, of course, several years ago, and you think, well, at least Dorothy and Toto haven't come to Michigan. Yeah, they visited in 2001. In 2001, we had two bills introduced to the House of Representatives to try and attempt to introduce intelligent design into our K-12, our kindergarten through 12th grade curriculum here in Michigan. And through a very good concerted effort of a bunch of academics and community leaders in the state, we managed to at least keep those from even going to committee. So we actually had an attempt here in Michigan before Ohio did. Ohio didn't come out as nicely as we did. The two bills are effectively dead here in Michigan, but it's something that isn't going to go away. The intelligent design movement really reflects kind of the strategy du jour to try and get creationism into the public classroom. And you say, well, what makes this different than all the other attempts that have been made in the past? After all, the U.S. Supreme Court and U.S. District Courts have dealt with this issue repetitively since 1982, and without any inferences to the possibility of being introduced, has very stringently said every time that religion belongs in theology classrooms, it belongs in social studies classrooms, if there, but it certainly doesn't belong in the science classroom. So why is this movement any different? Well, it's really not. And what I want to do tonight is give you a brief introduction, kind of the Cliff Notes version, the Reader Digest condensed form of what is intelligent design and how does that relate to science, and religious studies in general. Then I want to kind of follow up with some errors in logic. Is that what are the errors in logic and people who think that this really is science and it should be introduced into the classroom? What's their logical deductive pattern that they're following, and where are some fallacies in their logic? And then time allowed at the end, I want to try and look at some unintelligent designs in nature, because many proponents of intelligent design say, as I'll capstone here in a second, is that we look around us in nature and we see these beautiful, intricate designs, and there's no other way to describe how they occurred, how they arose, other than an intelligent designer. And to that I have to say, really? Let's look at some other alternatives. So what I want to do this evening is, let me turn this on here and we'll get started here, is for presentation overview, what I'd like to do is, first of all, is take a look at the relationship between science and religion, realizing that many of you are very well read on this topic, and we've discussed it. I've presented this in other meetings here, but it serves a good basis for our discussion tonight, and it's important to spend a few minutes doing that. I then want to take a look at what is evolution, and we have Dr. Bagsham in the audience from GVSU who doesn't effectively do that in even a 14-week course. You can't. I'm going to do it in about 2 to 3 minutes, but at least gives us a point of reference to, and for the context of the rest of this discussion. I also want to take a look then at what is intelligent design, recognizing that I'm trying to do a very cursory presentation of all of these items tonight, and I'll give you some suggestions for follow-up reading later on if you want to delve into this topic a little bit more. I then want to take a look at errors in deductive reasoning. Why do we have the problems we have with a great portion of the population thinking that intelligent design, thinking that creation, quote-unquote, science is in fact science? What are the errors there? I then want to take a look at unintelligent designs in nature. Do we really have spectacular designs in nature, or is there another way to look at it? So first of all, and then we'll end with a colloquium, some time at the end to ask some questions. And of course, as Jeff stated, we can always meet at Curly's afterwards to continue that conversation. So let's first of all take a look at kind of a compare and contrast between science and religion, because I'm going to propose to you, and correctly so, that evolution is science, that intelligent design is not. Evolution belongs in the left-hand column, the study of evolution, and intelligent design belongs in the right-hand column. I also want to preface discussion with saying that science is but one way of knowing. There are many, many valuable forms of human inquiry. Science is but one of them. Theology is very important. The social studies, the social sciences are very important. Religious studies are very important. Science is just one way of knowing, and unfortunately the public thinks that we as scientists believe that science is the beginning and the end of all forms of human inquiry, and that is certainly not the case, because science obviously has limitations to what we can address. Things that we can address then default to the theologians, default to the philosophers. So what falls within the context of science? Well, science, we say, is guided by natural law. Religion, however, is guided by supernatural intervention. Science explains what is observed with reference to natural laws. Those natural laws being the laws of physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, etc. Laws that we can refer to, whereas religion explains what is observed with reference to supernatural intervention. You'll see as we go through this list, basically, they're the antithesis of each other. Science is testable against the empirical world. Religion is not testable against the empirical world, and therefore falls outside the scope of scientific inquiry. Doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's wrong, just means it falls outside the field of scientific inquiry. A colleague of mine, Michael Shermer, has a nice thing he always says in his presentations. He says, when people ask me, do I believe in life after death? His response is, or what do you think about life after death? His response is, I think it's great. I'm all for it. Okay? But is it in the context of science? No, because science at this point can't test that. You say, aha, that means that there is life after death. No. Oh, so you're saying there is no life after death? No. We're just saying it falls outside the scope of science. That one defaults to the theologians, to the philosophers. Science has conclusions that are tentative, pending additional information. You say, wait. You're telling me that you can go ahead and make statements and say it so until you change your mind? Yeah, that's what's so great about science. You don't stick your head in the sand and say, well, we told you that electrons orbit in predictable orbits, and by gosh, we're sticking to that. Okay? No. It's tentative, pending additional information. That is not the case in religion. All conclusions in religion are final. Science is potentially falsifiable. What does that mean? Since it's testable, you have the chance to prove it possibly false. If I propose to you that mammals appeared in the fossil record before the jellyfish, can we test that in the fossil record? Is it potentially falsifiable? Yeah! If we find mastodon fossils below the layer of jellyfish, we have a problem to deal with there, don't we? So it's potentially falsifiable. Religion isn't testable, and therefore it's not falsifiable. Once again, doesn't mean it's wrong, just means it falls outside the realm of science. A really important one. Science asks a question and then seeks to find an answer, whereas religion provides an answer and seeks to find proof. A very important difference. What's evolution? In a nutshell, and we can debate this one all night long, but it works for our conversation here tonight. We're going to say that evolution is an inheritable change in a species over time. A lot of things evolve, right? I mean, the stock market evolves, your garden evolves, but from a biological standpoint, we talk about biological evolution is an inheritable change in characteristics in species over time. This is a good, kind of biology 101 definition. Later on, we clean it up in the class and we say, well, if we want to have a more finite definition, we can maybe clean this up and say, evolution are successive changes in allele composition and frequency in a population as regulated by mutation, genetic drift, gene flow, and selection pressure. You go, huh? Okay. The first one works just fine. It's an inheritable change in a species over time. Well, that then begs the next question. What's intelligent design? And I understand that I'm making this more encapsulated than maybe it should be, but not by much. We can pretty much in a nutshell say today's tenet of intelligent design is that the complexity that we see in the natural world is evidence of planning by a higher intelligence. Now, it doesn't go much further than that. Any definitions beyond that by the intelligent design camp gets pretty obtuse. We're not going to define what the intelligent designer is, what intelligence necessarily. It's kind of this ubiquitous, obtuse thing of intelligent designer. It, of course, begs the question from the scientific community, if things occur through intelligent design, there must be an intelligent designer. And what is that intelligent designer? Does it take the force of an unknown entity in nature? Is it a deity? Is it a tadpole? Is it a piece of granite? Well, I think we have all in our mind what that intelligent designer is. And so this is pretty much a thinly veiled attempt to bring some type of theology and deity into the science classroom. Ask somebody, what is the intelligent design caused by? Who is the designer? And then we see a bit of a problem in responding to that. Now, where does this come from? We have to kind of go back to the onset of this with William Paley, an English theologian. In 1802, he published a paper called, Natural Theology, I'm sorry. Right there. Read the sign, Greg. Natural Theology. Okay. I'm still trying to remember my children's name. Okay, what did we name you? So Natural Theology, and really what we see today in intelligent design is nothing more than a repackaging of Paley's original work on natural theology. Many of you picked up handouts tonight. There are some floating around, 60 or 7 floating around, that gives you basically chapter 1 of his book. And this book was very, very important in the 1800s. It was used as a textbook in British and American schools and taught as science for almost a century, well, not a century, about 50, 60 years in this country. And a lot of modern theology is still based on this, and we see it being recycled in intelligent design. What did Paley say? Let's take a look. Now, what I've tried to do is take his very verbose English grammar and encapsulate it. So these are quotations, but I've taken a little bit of liberty in taking out some of his adverbs and whatnot. You have the entire text in your hand. Here's what he said. In crossing a heath, insert here meadow, in crossing a heath, suppose I pitched, insert here kicked, my foot against a stone, insert here rock, and were asked how the stone came to be there. I might possibly answer that for anything I knew to the contrary, it had lain there forever. So Paley's saying, if I walk across a meadow and I slam my foot into a rock and somebody says, how did that get there? My response might just be, well, I have no idea. For all I know, it's been there forever. He follows up and says, but suppose I had found a watch upon the ground, and it should be inquired as to how the watch happened to be in that place. I should hardly think of the answer which I had before given, that the watch might have always been there. Yet why should not the answer serve for the watch as well as the stone? So when you find the watch, why can't you also respond, for all I know, it has always been here? Paley's response is that you can't have the same answer to both of those events, because the second event, finding the watch, says that when we come to inspect the watch, we perceive that we could not discover in the stone what we could not perceive in the stone, that its several parts are framed and put together for a purpose. Example, to produce motion. That if the different parts had been differently shaped from what they are, no motion at all would have been carried on, or none which would have answered the use that is now served by it. In other words, surely we can't say this watch has always been here, because look at the intricate design. There's no other way to describe this than to say that this has not always been here. The parts are so intricate that it clearly had to be designed. For it would not weaken the conclusion if we had never seen a watch made, the conclusion that it had to be made by a designer. So if we've never seen a watch made, we would still reach the same conclusion, that if we've never known an artist capable of making one, that we were altogether incapable of executing such a piece of workmanship ourselves, or of understanding in what manner it was performed, his conclusion is, an ignorance of this kind exalts our opinion of the unseen. So in our absence of knowing how to make a watch ourselves, or of knowing anybody that knows how to make a watch, or the technology involved, that exalts our respect for that unknown, of the unseen and the unknown artist's skiff, aka skill. We're enamored by the ability of somebody to do this, but it raises no doubt in our minds of the existence of such an artist. That's the whole premise of intelligent design, as depicted here by Paley in 1802. That if we can't explain it, if we find it too miraculous for science to explain at this time, clearly it's some unknown, unseen designer. To that, I have my scientific response. Really? Okay. So let's take a look at contemporary intelligent design. Ideas is known in the business right now. What's changed in a, well, how about this, 1802, 2002? Well, what's changed in 2 centuries? Not much, okay? What we have now is we've resurrected Paley's 1802 idea of intelligent design. He never called it intelligent design per se, but we've modified it. Current ideas, intelligent designers are now willing, most of them at least, are willing to say, well, we're willing to accept the Earth is more than 6,000 years old and change, according to Usher's calculations. We're willing to accept, heck, we'll give it 20,000 years, heck, we'll give it 4 million, we'll get whatever you want, we accept that. So many of them are willing to accept the antiquity of the Earth. And they're willing to accept that species do change somewhat, something that's called microevolution. Most ideas will recognize that, for instance, the cats. Lions may modify themselves and turn into leopards, which may turn into tigers, but they're all the same, quote, kind. And every time you see that in literature, when you see the word kind, you usually know which camp it's coming from. But what they're usually willing to say is that there's change in a gene pool, but one species did not give rise to another species. Some of these may even suggest that, well, lions, tigers, and leopards are all the same species, just different forms of that. So many of them are willing to say there's change within reason, but not from a phylogenetic standpoint. They're not willing to say that mammals came from reptilian-like stock, that reptiles came from fish-like stock. They're not willing to go that far by any stretch of the imagination. It introduces the concept of irreducible complexity. This is for your quiz next time. You need to know irreducible complexity and something called specified complexity. These are the new catchphrases. When I read the first 2 bills that were introduced here in Michigan for intelligent design, you had to read it 4 or 5 times and I say, what? Okay? Because the diction does everything they can to avoid what most people will be able to figure out from the definition. We'll keep you guessing. So let's take a look here. Contemporary ID and this concept of irreducible complexity, proposed by Michael Behe in 1996 in his seminal book that brought him to the national scene called Darwin's Black Box. I have a copy of it for here if you want to peruse it. And what he said in here was, and I have to thank Dr. Bajema, I was looking for this quote, and darned if I wasn't going through an email from Carl, and there it was, with reference to the page. So thank you very much. I didn't have to search for the book. By irreducible complexity, I mean a single system composed of several well-matched, interacting parts that contribute to the basic function, getting back to this watch idea. There are a lot of whole simple parts. When you put all the simple parts together, they do amazing complex things. Wherein the removal of any one of the parts causes the system to effectively cease functioning. Behe's view. There are things in nature that are so phenomenally complex that when put together they do amazing things, but any piece by itself is of no value. Therefore, ergo, it was created or designed in its present form. Really? Okay. His claim to fame here is the mousetrap. He uses this in his book, and this has been treated quite well. He's saying that a mousetrap, for instance, is a mousetrap of any value if it has less than the required pieces. If you don't have the spring, you don't have the trip plate, you don't have the kill bar. Is a mousetrap of any value with one fewer piece? Clearly this was designed to be a mousetrap, and any fewer pieces in any different combination wouldn't catch mice. Okay, and then he talks about the flagellum in bacteria. This is a little dark here. This is a little bacterium that has a flagellum, a little tail that corkscrews it through its environment. On the right-hand side shows a very schematic mechanical representation of what it looks like in a scanning electron micrograph. And Behe, as a biochemist, beat this one to death. This is his sacred cow here, is that biologists cannot explain the origin of the flagellum on the bacterium. We don't know where it came from, and it's such a complex thing, and it is, okay, that obviously the parts had to all be there at once, for without those parts, it doesn't serve any function. Well, the fallacy here is that we're going to have to come back and look at this and look at the fallacy in a second. But let me give you one other quote from Behe. He continues on to say that since natural selection, the process which drives evolution, since natural selection can only choose systems that are already working, in other words, natural selection can't deal with structures in transit to becoming complete. Since it can only deal with working systems, then if a biological system cannot be produced gradually, it would have to arise as an integrated unit in one fell swoop for natural selection to have anything to act upon. Really, here's the fallacy. In Behe's logic, is that it fails to take into account something called incipient structures. Incipient structures are structures in development. Let's go back to the watch example of Paley. How did the watch come about? Where's there some cobbler sitting in a shop one day, and then I'll have an epiphany, the light bulb went on and go, wait a minute, I'll invent something called glass. It'll be crystalline. You'll be able to see through it by melting sand. I'll develop something called the gear, and gears will move together, and something called a spring. A spring. It'll be tensile metal, but I need to invent metal. We'll put the metal together, and if I put all these things together, it'll produce a watch, but I need hands. Hands I'll make out. Come on. The watch was a result of gears having been invented, glass having been invented, metallurgy having been invented, spring steel having been invented, and the cobbler put all those structures and put them together. Were not each of those items of importance prior to being formed into a watch? Absolutely. Of course they were. How about the mousetrap? Mousetrap may not catch mice very well without its component parts, although it can. The course I teach for the National Science Foundation, the first night's homework assignment for all the professors, I send them home with a mousetrap. They can't get breakfast the next morning unless they come back with 3 different designs for killing mice minus at least one part. You can trap mice, not as effectively, but many different ways. But what if you take off the spring plate? Doesn't it make a great tie clip? Okay. How about just the board? Doesn't it make a great paperweight? So they may have other functions before the final design. Take a look at the early birds, the early what we now know, of course, are reptiles, but Archaeopteryx, which means ancient bird, the one that the anti-evolutionists like to think that, God, we have all this evidence to show that this doesn't work. No. But we're not suggesting to you as evolutionists that the bird wing evolved for flight, because evolution is not goal-oriented. You don't have a bunch of reptiles going on, guys, I'm really getting tired of walking. My nails are wearing down. Darn if those other guys aren't eating us. I think somebody should work on evolving wings. Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? We see that these mutations that drive this have a lot of other incipient functions before the development of the wing. Could be thermal regulation. Any of you ever walked on a balance beam? Where do your arms go? Okay? When you're climbing down a branch, wouldn't that be handy? We know from the hip structure these guys were runners. They ran after things and got them on the ground. What a great balancing act. But how about if you do climb up a tree now and you decide to jump off? Wouldn't that slow your descent? Do flying squirrels really fly? No, it's controlled crash, isn't it? Okay? And so this is an incipient structure that later on could continue to develop to the point where it now may have another function. And Behe doesn't take that into account. It's Biology 101. Also doesn't take into account these things called emergent qualities. And I basically just tread on this a little bit, that different properties arise in abilities as structures continue to evolve. Here's a great analogy that we have a retired colonel on campus. I called him today for the latest military hierarchy. The smallest unit in the Army is a soldier. What can one soldier do by themselves? Not a whole bunch, right? But what happens if we have a squad, which is 9 to 10 soldiers? Do new properties arise that the squad can do militarily that a single soldier could not? Oh, certainly. How about if we take the squads, we take about 10 squads together, we get a platoon of 16 to 44 soldiers. Do they have now new abilities and new military conquests they can do that an individual soldier can't do? What happens when we get up here to a brigade, a division, a corps? At each new level, aren't there new military abilities for that assemblage of soldiers? Absolutely. New possibilities emerge at each stage. As that early bird wing began to develop, new possibilities and utility began at each stage. Think of the development of the eye, which evolved at least 3 dozen different times in the kingdom Animalia. You say, well, how about the eye? How do you account for that? Isn't half an eye better than no eye? Would you rather be completely blind or just see light and dark? Light and dark. Would you rather see just light and dark or see silhouettes? Silhouettes. Would you rather see just silhouettes or clear black and white images? Clear black and white images. Would you rather see clear black and white images or faded colored images? Probably faded color images. Would you rather see faded color images or perfect color clarity? Is not each step along the way better than the previous? Absolutely. Behe, retake Bio 101. Okay? Then we have the other player in the field is William Dembski. William Dembski, who, by the way, just applied for a teaching position at Eastern Michigan University. I don't know how he fared there, but he says here in his book, I also have a copy of Intelligent Design. He's a very prolific writer, both these gentlemen are. And if you want to delve into the ID literature, there are the 2 places to go. And I have this book for you down here also. He says intelligence, whatever that is, leaves behind a characteristic trademark or signature. What he calls specific complexity. Okay, specific complexity. We're building up our vocabulary here. Now that begs the question, okay, what is specific complexity? Well, he says an event exhibits specified complexity if it meets these three criteria. It's contingent and therefore not necessary, which means it doesn't have to be there. It's just, the bells and the whistles. Is complex and therefore not repeatable by chance. That what we see in nature is so phenomenal, so intricate, so elaborate, it could have happened just by chance alone. And the third option is independent in the sense of exhibiting an independently given pattern. That's a little obtuse, okay? I asked him once what he meant by this, and I'm no closer to the truth after the response. But what I take it means is that it exhibits some type of independability in production of pattern. Let me give you an example. I'll give you an example in a second. But first of all, there's a fallacy here with this specified complexity. The fallacy is that specified complexity is a philosophical standpoint, not scientific, because you can't test it. Now, as a scientist, I'd have to say, doesn't mean it's wrong, just means it's not testable, so it falls outside the realm of scientific inquiry. You go, aha, Forbes, so you're saying it's okay? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we can test all the same claims scientifically, but we can't test this particular aspect of it. Also, if we accept specified complexity, it demonstrates something called a type 1 error. I'm going to give you an example of it in a second. In Philosophy 101, we say a type 1 error is accepting a falsehood, accepting something that isn't true. I'll show you how that works in just a second. But let's take a look at this poster. Has everybody seen this poster before? This is a classic. This is a poster of macro photographs of butterfly wings, right? And what do we see? In different species of butterflies, you can get this at any Hallmark store. I went online and did a web search and found about 500 hits in a second. It says what? A, B, C, D, E, F, yada, 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 Z, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's amazing. Okay? And it meets all the criteria, right, for specified complexity. Is it contingent and therefore unnecessary? I'd say the alphanumeric, Roman alphabet on butterfly wings is reasonably unnecessary. Maybe. Okay. Is it complex and therefore not repeatable by chance? My God, that's the alphabet. A through Z. We didn't throw any moths. These are butterflies, okay? And is it independent in exhibiting an independently given pattern? Wow. So it turns out that if we were looking at intelligent design, Dembski might say, this is an amazing example of intelligent design. Is there a positive scientific explanation for this? Absolutely. If you know about natural selection, and if we pan back with our camera, okay, we'll see that that's a very small portion of the wing. The larger pattern produces usually cryptic patterning so the butterfly doesn't get eaten. Dembski might say, this is God's vision, telling us that the only true alphabet on the planet is the English alphabet. Forget Asian script, forget everything else, truly it's right here. I think not. Okay? We also can continue, and I took this example from Richard Dawkins. I've elaborated on this, but it's a great example of another thing that intelligent designers might find in nature, the banana. It meets all of those criteria for intelligent design. The intelligent design banana. How come? Well, look at it. Easy grip ridges. Ever hold a banana? When's the last time you go, oops, I dropped it? Now you drop pears, you drop peaches. You don't drop a banana. Look at that. It's designed to fit right into the joint, and you count them. They match. Look at that. Beautifully designed. Packaging has easy open tab. You snap and it comes open. This isn't like opening a new CD. We need blasting caps. It just opens. It's a beautiful design. It's available in family packs. Can't beat it with a stick. Designed for easy transport. That's not like orange, orange, orange. You get a whole bunch at once. UV resistant packaging. Contoured for easy consumption from any direction, front, backwards, top. That's a good design. Wrapper doubles as a napkin. Disposable and biodegradable wrapper. Toss it, it's okay, you don't have to feel guilty about it. Built-in ripeness indicator. Turns yellow when ripe. Yeah, of course your bread turns color when it's bad, but here we go, built-in ripeness indicator, enjoyed by many species. This is too good to be true. Hey, you can eat it on the go. It meets all the requirement for Dembski's intelligent design. And you say, well, therefore it's proof. Why are you arguing? Is there possibly a scientific explanation for the evolution of the banana? Yeah, not to mention almost 200 years of cultivation. But yeah, okay, there are plenty of possible explanations. But as we commonly see, industry usually imitates nature. That's no different with the banana. Okay? It's such an intelligent design. We can make bicycles, boats, and rafts out of it. So it's, truly, by Dembski's criteria, an intelligent design or not. Now, what are some errors then? Why would Dembski, why would Behe, why would others then believe intelligent design? Now, granted, I've had a little fun at their sake. Let's take a look at why would somebody believe this? Well, a type 1 error that I mentioned before in statistics we say is when you accept a falsehood as true. That's called a type 1 error. An example: quicksand is safe to cross. If we have quicksand here and I say, trust me, bud, it's safe, you go down. Type 1 error, too bad, you die, so sad. Okay? Type 2 error, rejecting the truth. I say quicksand is not safe to cross. Okay? Don't cross that quicksand. It's not safe to cross. He doesn't believe me. Too bad, you died, so sad. You're in the same boat either way, right? Whether you make a type 1 or a type 2 error, rejecting a truth or accepting a falsehood, neither one is a good scenario. Accepting intelligent design is making a type 1 error, accepting a falsehood. How come? Let me give you an example. A couple of you have seen this before. Okay? How do we deal with gaps in knowledge? Well, we accept false alternatives sometimes. When there's something we don't know as humans, that's an uncomfortable place to be for many people. Shouldn't be. I'm quite happy to plead ignorance. I do it daily. It beats the heck out of me. Okay? You try and find the answer, but I'm not going to flush my goldfish or put my hamster in the microwave because I don't know an answer. I'm comfortable not knowing. Okay, here's your exam. Okay, this is your test. You ready? Okay, this is for the whining cheese afterwards. Okay? What has 4 legs, wags its tail, buries bones, and barks? I'm going to give you 3 options here. Okay? Is it option A, a cat? No! You to think about that? People in the back discussing it. No, it's not. Okay, it's not a cat. Is it option B, a bird? No! It's clearly not option A or option B, so obviously this was an easy test. What is it? It's option C. Really? A fish? You made a type 1 error. You accepted a falsehood. You assumed that if it wasn't option A or option B, clearly it must be option C. What did you forget? Option D. If science can't explain the flagellum, clearly it must be an intelligent designer. That's a type 1 error. No. Give me option C. Give me none of the above. We didn't used to be able to explain rainbows, lightning, thunder. We can now. So what do we do? Whoops. The computer did funny things. So we can accept false alternatives in dealing with our gaps in knowledge, or something called creating God of the gaps. A lot of you know about God of the gaps. When there's a gap in our knowledge, what do? We insert a deity. We've done this all across times and civilization. Before we knew where lightning came from, what do we have? A god of lightning. Before we knew where the seasons came from, what do we have? A god of the seasons. Before we knew where magma came from, we had a god of the volcano. We have to have an answer. If we can't explain it, therefore it must be a deity. That's called God of the gaps. Insert a god in our gap in knowledge. That's a dangerous thing to do. Because what happens once you discover where rainbows come from? What happens when you discover where thunder comes from? The unemployment office at the God line gets very, very long. The other option is by recognizing that, and this is very important, I hope you can all get comfortable with this in your life, that unexplained doesn't mean inexplicable. Just because we can't explain it now doesn't mean we won't be able to explain it in the future. And the intelligent design camp commonly says, science doesn't know. That's not the case, for instance, even with the flagellum. I mean, we know some of the precursors because Behe says the precursors to flagellum have no biological function. That's not true. Those same proteins are used by some bacteria to inject toxins into other bacteria. Even in clotting, I teach anatomy physiology, and one of the amazing things to teach is blood clotting in humans. It's a very important cascading biochemical reaction. You go, how could this possibly have occurred except for a designer? Well, they're modified digestive enzymes, folks. Okay? They're modified digestive enzymes. So just because you say it isn't so doesn't mean we don't have the knowledge. But even if we don't have the knowledge, that's okay. It's okay not to know. Unexplained doesn't mean inexplicable. So the question then comes from the intelligent designers commonly, well, then how can we explain the very intricate and complex structures that we see in nature by any means other than an intelligent designer? My answer to that is, well, if an intelligent designer really is responsible for these amazingly complex structures, if an intelligent designer really is at work, why are there so many inferior and just plain unintelligent and lousy designs in nature? Commonly, people say, well, the human is the epiphany of design. It's perfect. Really? Okay? Come on. You know, every time you watch like a Star Wars movie or Star Trek, you notice all the aliens are just modifications of the human form. You notice that? I mean, you know, they can't get past it because we obviously must be the best design. Really? Okay? If you were designing a human, how would you design your body differently? For one, Greg, do you have change for $1? Just a second, let me check. Why, yes, I do, because I have an eye on the end of my finger. Okay? You know? It's Detroit. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Your car's just broken down. You have to go into a dark alley. Before you enter, hope it's safe. Okay, you can look. If you have children, wouldn't an eye in the back of your head be great? Get your feet off the table. Okay? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't you like to have the vision of a hawk, the smell, the olfaction ability of your dog, the speed of a leopard? Are we the best design or are we good enough? We're good enough. If we're the best design, we need to look at the job pool again for a new designer. Let me give you some examples. Some unintelligent designs in nature. And these are some quick ones, and this could go on for, you know, I mean, how many days do you have? In fact, you know, I'll be lecturing in class, and I'll think of another one, I'll write it down, and the students go, you're writing another one down, aren't you? Yeah, this is a really good one. You know, they just, you know. Okay? Why do you folks have 32 teeth and a mouth designed for 28? What, to keep orthodontists in business and, you know, whatnot? No. As we know, our ancestors, when we go back and we can test this in the fossil record, our hypothesis is that our hominid ancestors had longer mandibles and maxilla to accommodate more grinding teeth when they were more herbivorous. Can you test that? Yes. Is that what we find out? Sure. What happens if you don't get your wisdom teeth taken out? Can they become impacted? Can they become abscessed? Can you use your life from that? You darn well can. Pretty bad design. Give us 4 fewer teeth or slightly longer jaw set, thank you very much. Why are the rods and cones placed behind the nerves in the human eye? This is a terrible design. Okay, here we go. Eye Anatomy 101. Here's the back of your eyeball. The image comes in through the lens, strikes the structure called the retina. And there in the retina are rods and cones, and they really do look like little rods and cones in there. And that's what light has to strike before you can see any image. Now, you think, if you were looking at a football game with your binoculars, would you ask the person ahead of you to hold up some tissue paper so you could look through that? Of course you wouldn't. That would be dumb. Okay? That's how your eye's built. It turns out that your rods and cones are back here, and all of the wiring, all the neurons supporting them, are in front of it. So the image has to first go through all of this wiring before it gets to the rods and the cones. Did somebody have the blueprints upside down when they built that? But in mollusk, in squid and octopods, they did it right. Their wiring's behind the rods and the cones. I guess their designer is more intelligent than ours. Or is there maybe a scientific explanation? Okay, why isn't the retina attached to the choroid? Okay, the retina once again back here. You have jelly in your eyeball, don't you? As you get older, what that jelly does, called vitreous humor, it pushes the retina against the inside of the ball. And that's what's holding your retina up against the ball, the inside of your eye. If that jelly wasn't there, your retina would just spontaneously collapse on itself. As you get older, what happens to your vitreous humor? It dries out. What happens to the pressure against the retina? it decreases, and you get detached retinas. That's not a good design. Doesn't happen to octopods, okay? A really bad design. Well, and why has the eye evolved at least 36 times in evolution? Didn't the intelligent designer get it right the first time? Or is there a scientific explanation as to why we'd see many starts and stops in a design in incipient structures? Why are human eustachian tubes open at one end, let alone to the oral cavity? Here's your eardrum, right? It goes down. This is your assignment when you go home with wherever you live. Say, ah, and go back there. You're going to see at the top two little holes there that are the end of your eustachian tubes. It opens into your mouth. What moves up in there? Bacteria. In fact, 50% of children by their first birthday and 90% of children by their sixth birthday have otitis media, which is bacterial pus inflammation of the eustachian tube, which leads untreated to what? Deafness. That's not a good design in nature. You say, well, why do we have to have it open in the first place? You didn't. Why don't you have it open at the top of your head like a snorkel? There are a lot of other possibilities. So next time you're swallowing a burrito from Taco Bell, careful, there's an opening back there. Not a good design. Okay? Now, here you go, ladies. My human anatomy classes, I always say the worst design in the human body is the female reproductive tract. Now, since we're on television, I can't explain exactly the better parts of it, but the bad part here is that you have, here is your friend, the uterus down here. Here we have the oviducts, a.k.a. the fallopian tubes, and then the ovary over here. Here you go. Here's your ovary, ladies. Here's your fallopian tube. This is in your abdominal cavity. The fallopian tube does not attach to the ovary. It's open. So when you ovulate, there's a possibility your egg doesn't go down the fallopian tube. Where does it go? Into the abdomen, resulting in an abdominal pregnancy. What happens when cells from the inside the uterus, the endometrial cells, move up from the uterus, come down here and get out that gap and get into your abdominal cavity? You get endometriosis, which can be fatal, and 40% of you women will experience it. Sharks have it closed. Fishes have it closed. Frogs have it closed. Most mammals have it closed. That's not a good design. Okay? Why do humans have menstrual cycles? Ladies? Okay? See, they give you the... Yeah. So are they. Which proves, by the way, that if there really is a God, it must truly be a man, because no woman would do that to another woman. Okay? We thank you for the menstrual cycles. We thank you for the hemorrhoids during pregnancy. We thank you for the stretch marks. Thank you, okay? For my half of the species. But why do you menstruate? The human biologists always tell their students the reason you menstruate is because the lining of the uterus has to be shed in order to accept the new egg the following month. Yeah, right. Someone should tell the other 3,999 species of mammals that don't do it and do just fine. It's a dumb design. Who wants to go camping while menstruating in grizzly bear country? Okay? Not a good idea in the evolution of humans. That's not intelligent. Okay? And why are human eggs produced in utero rather than just before ovulation? Ladies, I don't know if you know this, you produced all of your eggs. Anywhere from about 250,000 to 500,000 eggs were in your ovaries before you were born. They sit there till you're 12, 13, 14 years old before they start coming out once a month. You don't stop ovulating because you've run out of ammo. My God, you're going to die with 600,000 eggs. You want to continue to ovulate? We'll give you estrogen. You can menstruate till you're 90. You go crazy, okay? But what happens if you try and reproduce beyond age 30? You have a chance of things like Down syndrome, trisomy event. How come? Because the eggs you're ovulating at year 30 are how old? 30 years old. How about those happy sperm that got up there? How old are they? 72 hours. That's not intelligent. Okay? I'm a sea turtle biologist originally. We used to capture sea turtles in the Great Barrier Reef. We chase them in a boat, and then we jump on a perfectly safe boat onto this turtle in shark-infested waters, onto these 500-pound turtles. And you say, that's not smart. No, that's not intelligent. But we don't jump on fresh turtles because we've had biology. We know that they have a 3-chambered heart. You chase them for 5 minutes. Because it turns out the high oxygen blood recirculates with the low oxygen blood. And after about 15 minutes, they go, But it doesn't happen in birds and mammals. What, the intelligent design only applied to birds and mammals? Not the rest of the kingdom Animalia? Here you go. Okay? I'm going to show you something that's so amazing, I can only show it to you once. You ready? Watch. Okay, I'll do it again. Here you go. In reverse this time. Whoa! That's amazing! That's a 360 joint. Try it on some other animal. Only some primates can do that. Go home and try it on your cat. Okay? First time there's a lot of resistance. After that, it goes quite easily. Okay? In the sense of science, try it on every cat you do, repeat your experiment. Okay? But wouldn't it be intelligent to have every joint be a 360? How about when somebody says, hey, Greg, what do I have to do? Yes? Okay. Wouldn't everybody go, whoop, what do you want? That's not a good design. Wouldn't it be better to have that everywhere? Okay? Take a look at the radius and the ulna. You can pour a beer this way. Try and pour a beer the other way. There you go. That's a dumb design, having the radius and the ulna smash into each other. A 360 joint would have made beer pouring a heck of a lot easier. That's not intelligent. And we can go on with things like autoimmune disorders. Why do we have rheumatoid arthritis? Why do we have lupus? Why do we have type 1 diabetes? Those are all autoimmune disorders. They're not diseases you catch. They're errors in metabolism. Ladies, we can do it again. What? Would we run out of bone in making your pelvis? Okay? Well, we said, okay, the baby's head can only be this size. If you violate this rule, you and the baby die. I produce babies with big heads. Notice I say I produce. My wife had something to do with it. But, we produce these huge babies with little bodies, okay, and big feet. 2 of my 3 children said, I'm not going out that. Give me another option, right? So you do a cesarean and you put Velcro in, so next time you have womb with a view. But, this is not a very impressive way. We have a lot of maternal death still. That's not bad design. And, the list goes on and on and on. So when you look at the fact that if we were even to accept this, not even making that type 1 error, that, okay, intelligent design, we do see designs that are unexplainable in nature. How do you account for all the mistakes? How do you account for all the roadkill? And especially in a being that was supposedly made in the image of the Creator. Couldn't we have done a little bit better? Wouldn't Detroit probably even design us a little bit better? And is there another explanation? Just because we can't explain something doesn't mean that we default to option B. And never forget, none of the above. If you want to delve into this, 3 suggested readings I have for you. The 2 top ones here are from the Intelligent Design camp, and probably the best reading from the Evolution camp is from Robert Pennock from Michigan State, who spoke for the Free Thought Association and also GRCC last year. Tower of Babel. And these are very easy, very accessible. They're not written from a scientific standpoint, especially the top 2. But did I say that? Okay. But so I have these. You can take a look at them here. Okay. So that kind of gives us a nice little precursor, introduction here to Intelligent Design Made Easy, Cliff Notes versions. So thank you for paying attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them. Do we have the ability to turn the lights on, Jeff? By any chance? Thank you.
It's just more of a comment. Maybe you'd like to comment on it. When someone confronts me with how perfectly things fit together and how it must be from intelligence, I say, well, if it didn't work in the habitat that it's in, it would either die or modify until it did. So since our reasoning is citing causes, after 4 billion years of causes acting to make things fit together, with 20/20 hindsight, it looks like intelligence to us. It seems like it's an illusion.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And my response to that is don't necessarily believe what you see. Does the sun rise every morning? Well, it must. After all, I see it.
Most places.
Most places, yeah. Unless Michigan. When I moved in Michigan, I realized that wasn't necessarily the case. But you see it, go, well, truly, I can see it with my eyes. Remember, there may be another explanation. Don't jump to those conclusions. That's exactly right. Because What we understand in being human is that trying to search alternative explanations sometimes takes a lot of intellectual activity and work. And some of us sometimes are just intellectually lazy or don't have the time to pursue that, and it's easier just to be told what the answer is dogmatically. Tell me that thunder is the angels bowling. Tell me that lightning is the angry God. Don't make me understand about ion and electron transfer. I'm happy with the bowling angel thing. And we tend to do that as parents, don't we, right? And don't do your kids a disservice, folks. You think, well, they're too young to understand. No, 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 no. It's not our children's inability to learn. It may be our inability to teach. Keep trying till you get it right. Don't default to angels and leprechauns. Sir?
Just, I suppose, another point or comment is that there are marketing truths, there are legislative truths, there are debates, and the intelligent design people use all of these devices. Mm-hmm. Religion uses these devices. They speak of a higher moral authority, yet there's a lot of lying for Jesus because it works. How do you, that's kind of frustrating. And you're helping from the other
right,
side.
Right. I think a point I do want to make that I maybe didn't make in the talk is also understand that in the talk tonight I didn't say, except from one quoting someone, did I say creationist? I said anti-evolutionist. Isn't that kind of cumbersome? It's necessary. Because understand that in a survey done by also the Skeptic Society and also the National Academy of Sciences that, I forget the number off the top of my head, I'm making this up, but it's pretty close. About 50 to 55, 60% of practicing scientists have faith in a deity. So the two are compatible. So being a creationist, believing in a creator, doesn't necessarily mean you don't wholeheartedly accept the science of evolution. You may have some problems as to where it all started, but even like the Catholic Church says, evolution, wonderful science. Next question. Okay? They agree to disagree on how it all started, but biological evolution, at least, deals with once life was here, how did it evolve after that? Cosmology deals with, well, let's get back to Big Bang and whatnot, and all camps suffer from problems there. But you're absolutely right, as it turns out that science, of course, is not funded in a manner that allows us to go out and lobby politically. Whereas the anti-evolution camp is very well funded because they see this as a strategy. In fact, what's called the wedge strategy from the Discovery Institute, the desire being to drive a wedge between scientists and the teaching of evolution, and that is the goal. And we understand why they want to do it, but as scientists we say it's not appropriate because here's a little gee whiz fact for you, and I always try and take these numbers, divide by 10, and make up my own mind. But no matter how you read, if we were to go back and take every scientist that has ever lived on the planet since the dawn of science, including all of those alive today, 90% of all those scientists are alive today. Think about that. This is a more scientifically based society than we have ever seen in our history of our civilization and we'll probably ever see. Can we afford to send our students out into that environment without a basic understanding of evolution? Because it's more than the content of evolution. Because if I tell the teachers, I spent the last 3 years, and Dr. Bajam was on the steering committee, trying to retrain high school teachers on how to teach evolution. And what I tell them is that if your students leave the course at the end of the semester saying, I don't accept evolution because it's bad science, you have a problem. If they say, I don't accept evolution because it contrasts with my religious beliefs, fine. But if the students say, I don't accept evolution because it's bad science, you haven't done the basic job of teaching how science operates. And it becomes a wonderful vehicle for teaching how science operates. And this is why we always tell our teachers, teach the principles and the nature of science before you try and go down that road of teaching evolution. Otherwise, it won't make any sense. So what we do is try and teach the science aspect. We're not funded to go out and do anything else. And the political lobby system is alive and well in the U.S., and that's why they're so effective as they were in Ohio. And hopefully will not be here in Michigan. In the back? Yes, sir.
Yes. Your analysis is excellent, and I'm not criticizing it at all. I wonder, though, are the people in intelligence design really that concerned about the truth of their position, but rather it's a vehicle to get religion back into the school, particularly Missionaries always set up orphanages. Why? We get access to the children. When I talk to missionaries or ex-missionaries, they say there are very few true adult conversions. If they are conversions, they only are people who first were initiated to Christianity as children. Well, that becomes part of the strategy then for missionaries to establish orphanages. The schools, however, they lost control, and they need a vehicle to get religious indoctrination back into the school. And so intelligent design is not an alternative position that is arrived at to be consistent with their Christian beliefs.
Right.
It's rather a thought-out strategy to reach innocent young children when they are young and implement their ideology. So it's much more cynical than mistaken.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
I think we'd have to look at in any motivation, anything that any aspect of society or civilization does, you're going to have a continuum on motivation as to why are we motivated to be here tonight. Some of you, if you had to stay home, it would have been doing the laundry. So you're motivated to be here. This was the lesser of the alternatives, okay? The other motivation was, there are whole reasons that we're motivated to be here tonight, and we do what we do, why we have the jobs we have, why we pursue the relationships we have. So you will see the entire continuum invested there. I do not, however, disagree in any manner that the New Intelligent Design movement or the repackaged Paley 1802 movement is, in fact, nothing more than an attempt to get religion back into the school. There's no doubt about that. That's unequivocal. I agree with you wholeheartedly there. And so, is it science? Absolutely not. Were they successful in Ohio? Well, the Ohio School Board just a couple weeks ago said that they're not going to mandate the teaching of intelligent design, but they will support and advocate the teaching of what was the wording, Carl? Of contrasting theories, alternatives to evolution. Pretty euphemistic there, pretty obtuse, and that was the best they could get, but that's really too close. And Carl and I and others spent the good part of 2001 lobbying in Michigan, trying to make sure those bills died, and we were successful enough in doing that along with a lot of others, Robert Pennick from MSU and the Michigan Citizens for Science. But yesterday, we had a new House sworn in. And are you aware that you should go to the website? There is a very elaborate prayer read every day at the opening to the Michigan Senate. And this isn't just, nice and nice. I mean, these are fire and brimstone prayers that are read, and you can get them online and turn up your pacemaker when you read them. And that you think was, well, okay, but, it kind of sets the tenor for who's in our House and what the potential is for such things possibly passing in Michigan. And what we're trying to do as science educators, and once again, understanding that many, many, many scientists have fervent creationist beliefs, but they can separate that from their scientific endeavor. And as educators, that's what we're asking you to do. We don't care what you do in your private lives. We're not trying to mess with your personal faith-based system, but understand the science. What you do with it when you go home is fine, but let's keep it out of that science classroom. Jeff, is there yes, back in the cheap seats.
They just got the new issue of Playboy today.
Uh-huh.
They have an article about intelligent design and what its proponents are trying to do.
So you're sticking to that story, huh? My dad used to do that. It was a really good article this month on tennis shoes. Okay, Dad. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's really, I recommend people seeing it even if they don't want to,
Mhm.
They mentioned the last 2 points that you made and this gentleman here made about some scientists having religious beliefs, but then being able to leave it at home when they go to work.
Mhm.
And they also interviewed or had a quote from a preacher who basically came out and said, intelligent design is a vehicle to bring people to Jesus Christ.
Right.
And that's how they
Sure.
So everything you just said
And that's quite all right. And I just want to restate once again so we all understand is that we as scientists are not saying don't have a faith, don't pursue your theology. That's an important aspect of human inquiry. It's an important part of what's many of us and our outlook on life. That's quite all right. We're just saying don't mix the venue of presentation. Don't do it in the science classroom. Teach it across campus in comparative religions. Teach it across campus in theology. And that's where it belongs. And just because people want things taught doesn't necessarily mean we do it. I mean, should we we watched the Raelians, remember, cloning of last week? The Raelians, should we teach Raelian theology now? Because should we teach phrenology? Should we teach, tea leaf reading. Just because there's a lobby that wants it taught, we have to make a decision. The professionals and academicians decide what is considered appropriate science, what is considered appropriate academic science, and academic content, and unanimously it's been decided that intelligent design et al, whatever we clothe it in, is not science. Is there a... Yes, sir.
Sir, I think you have to be living on closet to know that there's been an uprising of fundamentalism in the United States. Has your career been adversely or positively affected by this?
Well, I moved to Michigan 9 years ago from California. As we say, nothing in the new millennium is a pain in the bottom. Everything is a challenge and an opportunity. Okay? When I moved to the Midwest, I realized that there were many challenges and opportunities facing a science educator here. And my colleague, Dr. Long, and I used to teach zoology for major students. And we'd get in the hallway every day and say, we'd try and teach that. And we'd go in the hallway and go, I can't believe it. These students have no idea about the basic principles of science, let alone evolution. How are we going to do this? And we whined about it for 2, 3, 4 years. All you teachers know, I call it hallway catharsis, right? You go out in the hallway with a colleague, and, and you go back in, well, students, today, right? It allows you to get back in and do what you need to do. And we realized after 3 or 4 years of catharsis, it wasn't working. It wasn't getting any better. So we said we never put our money where our mouth was. So Dr. Long had the foresight to write a grant to the U.S. Department of Education to fund a 3-year grant in Michigan, to fund it through the Michigan Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education funds, to try and retrain K-12 teachers in Michigan to learn how to teach the science of evolution and to teach them content. And we were a pioneer in the U.S. No other state did it. We did it. Little Grand Rapids, sleepy Grand Rapids. We were the genesis. We did it. And kudos to GRCC for saying, no problem. We realize we're in a community that may find problems with that. But even the state assembly, it was approved by everybody. We were amazed. We were ready to go. But there are a lot of intelligent people who say, that's okay. That's science. That's faith. Next question.
Basically, the question I had for you, the school system that I went through made a very big emphasis of always saying the theory of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of Darwin's trying to explain the mechanism which drove it. And when I speak to people now, also that always comes up, people always say, well, God is fact, evolution is theory, or throw that type of stuff out. And so what I really want to know, because I haven't really spoken to a lot of scientists, the theory aside, is the basic process of evolution considered fact? And do you think that the schools are doing enough to actually get that across? I think when you mentioned the students leaving before and not really having a basic idea, they think that they can take it or leave it because it's just a theory in science.
Sure.
Is evolution considered a fact or a theory, I guess is the question.
A lot of what we struggle over in this whole discussion on science versus, for lack of a better term, creationism, is that a lot of what we're looking over is diction. We have a lot of diction problems. We all need to be on the same page and have the same definition. So in science, we say a hypothesis. A lot of teachers, unfortunately, say, "Well, it's an educated guess." That doesn't do justice to the vigor, if you will, of a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a testable statement about the natural world. Can I test the hypothesis that whales evolved from 4-legged ancestors? Do I have to be there to observe that? No. How can I test that? I can go back to the fossil record and look for older fossils, and if I find older and older whales with longer and longer legs, that's a testable hypothesis. Next thing, we have something called a scientific fact. A scientific fact is defined as an observation that has been repeatedly confirmed. Repeatedly confirmed. When you throw a ball up in the air, a 20-pound ball up in the air, what's it do? It comes back down. Sometimes or all the time? All the time, right? That's a fact, right? That fact is called gravity, right? That's a fact. It's that our observation has been repeatedly confirmed. Do we see the transition of forms in the fossil record? Do we see, in most cases, but not always, complex forms arising from least complex forms? Do we see an increase in diversity of species over time from fewer species? Yes, that's a fact shown in the fossil record. Then we have a law. What's a law? A law is a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the natural world. An example, we all know this in Michigan. I learned it my first winter. If you take distilled water at standard atmospheric pressure down to 0 degrees centigrade, what will it do? Freeze. Some of the time or all the time? All the time. When you take it up to 100 under those conditions, what will happen? It'll boil. That's the law, right? Under those conditions, it will happen. Then we get to the theory. What's a theory? A theory is a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the natural world that involves tested hypotheses, known facts, and laws and inferences. It has strong predictive ability to allow us to anticipate events and outcomes. Now, what people misunderstand is they think that this list of going from hypothesis to fact to law to theory is a hierarchical system. It's promotional. That if you're a good hypothesis, and a lot of people believe you, we'll make you a fact. Okay? And if you're a really good fact and you have some other friends, we'll call you a law. And if we have a whole bunch of laws, we'll make a theory. No, it's not a hierarchical presentation like that. So we get boggled down with the theory of evolution. Natural selection, understanding, and evolution are not synonyms. Natural selection is the process by which we may have the evolution of new forms. If you want to look at it simply, the process is natural selection. The end product may be the evolution of new forms. So what is evolution? We're kind of splitting hairs here, and I used to stand up and say, well, evolution is a fact. In science, nobody can test that evolution happened. Do we struggle over the fine intricacies of how it happened? Oh, absolutely. That's what science does. That's how you get refunded with your grant the next year. Several questions still remain. Okay, you know. So there are always going to be discussions on the finer points of the process. However, Eugenie Scott, who some of you in the audience know from the National Center for Science Education, I did a presentation last year with her, and afterwards over coffee, she says, you know, Greg, I don't know if you should say science is a fact. And, you know, we talked about it for a couple hours, and we agreed to disagree on that. But when we have evolution as a theory, yeah, but we suffer from a problem. Is the fact, if you will, if we call it a fact, and the theory bear the same name. Ouch. Gravity doesn't suffer from that, right? Gravity is a fact, but the theory that seeks to explain it is called what? Relativity. We should change one of the names and we might get over that. So would I feel comfortable saying that the evidence for evolution is a fact? Oh, sure, absolutely, unequivocally. What do we want to call it? The theory of evolution. Don't confuse the scientific usage of theory with the colloquial or the vernacular usage, right? When you say, I have a theory that Enron stock's going to go through the ceiling, yeah, you run with it. Okay, yeah. What's the basis? That's just a wag, right? Okay, it's a wild guess, okay? And so that's a theory in common usage. In science, it's almost the antithesis. We say it's a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the material world. It's very different. So this is what the general public can't get over. Well, it's just the theory. That's a misuse of the term scientific. This is why in science classes, I know Dr. Badgman, I always preface with a scientific hypothesis, a scientific theory, a scientific law to try and separate it, and that helps a bunch. And I can give you references for those definitions if you want.
Greg, I've got a question for you. Of the intelligent design promoters like BE and so forth, do any of them make any predictions that are testable at all? And I think that is probably somebody's cell phone. Checking in.
Oh, is it?
If you have a cell phone, turn it off.
Okay. No, nothing is testable. We would love to have, and the James Randi Foundation, some you're familiar with, has a $100,000 prize that's for tests of the paranormal, of things of this. If you can prove it under scientifically controlled conditions, you get $100,000. Please come forward. Anybody who wants to come forward, let us test it. Now remember, if it can't be tested, doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, just means it falls outside the realm of science, and that's okay. But we're saying in the science classroom, teach what is testable.
Yeah, this is, I guess I'm asking for your input or your reaction here, Greg. Earlier on you mentioned that if an idea is non-testable, if something that's non-testable, then you turn it over to other realms, say outside of the scientific field. I guess my question is, or a comment, it seems to me that if by defaulting non-testable ideas to other disciplines, and if we recognize theology as a legitimate discipline, doesn't that reinforce the explanations that they come up with to kind of fill that gap?
No, because your alternative is to say if science can't address it, it's a dead issue. That's not how we discover new things. We can't say that would be the same as saying that science is the only realm of knowing. If it's not testable, there is no further inquiry. Maybe through study by theologians or philosophers or social scientists, it might provide some insight which would in fact produce some more information which may kick it back into the science camp. But to say that if it's not testable by science, it's a dead issue, really wouldn't progress our civilization. And there are many accounts of that. Because remember, what used to be the body of science before the Renaissance? It was the church, right? Didn't do a heck of a good job on science, but we came a long way. So they're not necessarily mutually exclusive camps, but usually they are. So I would encourage those other forms of human inquiry because they may be valuable, not in producing any more scientific information, but I would, and we did a survey, and our Jeff did a survey here in the Free Thought Association last year, and asked how many people in this group have some type of faith-based, theistic beliefs. And it wasn't zero, folks. It wasn't zero. The first 2 rows of you probably have some type of deity belief, and that's okay, because that works for you. It may not be logical, it may not be scientific, but it works for you. And I think anything gets you through the day with a smile as long as it's legal, okay? Go for it. Thank you very much for paying attention, and I appreciate it. Jeff?